Hey, good morning, good morning, good morning. How are you this morning? Hope you're doing just absolutely fantastic. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Now, before I get into our continuation and study of the challenge of Christ, I want to encourage you to go to my websites, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, and eschatology.org. I want to tell you, there's a wealth of information that is on there, absolutely free of charge. In addition, have tons of books, DVDs, MP3s that are available at extremely reasonable prices. And if you really want to dig down into the subjects that we are exploring here on Now TV, that's a fantastic way to do it. Now, this program is airing in October 2021. For the rest of this month, I'm offering an absolutely fantastic three-book special. Now, this is for U.S. orders only, but it includes my book, Seal Up Vision and Prophecy, an in-depth study of the 70 weeks of Daniel, chapter 9, 24 and following, and the phrase, seal up vision and prophecy. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there is a wide range, a consensus view. Now, what that means was that by the end of the 70 weeks, all prophecy would be fulfilled. Now, there are some scholars who reject that, but the reasons for rejecting that are just, they're not even close to good reasons. So, my book, 70 Weeks Are Determined, and it's Seal Up Vision and Prophecy. Number 2, 70 weeks are determined for the resurrection. Just like 70 weeks were determined to fulfill all prophecy, the 70 weeks were determined for the resurrection. I don't know if you've ever thought about it or not, but the fact is that the 70-week prophecy of Daniel 9 is about the resurrection. And finally, my book, Elijah Has Come, a solution for Romans 11, 25 to 27. Now, you may be sitting there going, well, how does that relate to Daniel? Believe you me, it has a ton to do with it. Now, if you purchased all three of these books separately, paid separate shipping, they would cost you $60. But for the rest of October 2021, U.S. orders only. Now, if you live outside of the continental U.S. and you'd like to have these books, contact me personally through my email, and I'll show you how you can do that at a reduced price. But again, U.S. orders only, $39.95. That saves you $20, folks. So please take advantage of that. Get yourself some great material that will help you understand the Scripture in a way that you've never done so before. All right. Well, for 2 years now, we've been focused on our examination of the challenge of Christ. You know, it's interesting to me how so many Bible students are actually unaware, literally unaware, of the challenge of Christ. Some years ago, I used to go to Abilene Christian University lectures and set up a booth in their display area. And William Bell would go with me, and he and I would share with anyone who would come by, stop at our booth, take the time to listen to what we had to say. And we would share with them the challenge of Christ. And I have to tell you, it blew us away that as we talked to preachers, elders, deacons, men who had been in the church for years and years and years, and when you would share with them what Jesus said in John 10, 37 and following, do not believe me for my words' sake, believe me for my works. If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. And they would stand there, we would share that with them, and very, very, very often they would stand there and go, well, okay, what's the problem? Then we would share with them Matthew 16, 27 and 28, and a host of other passages, of course. But in Matthew 16:27 and 28, Jesus said, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels, and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here. That was 2,000 years ago, folks. We don't have any 2,000-year-old people wandering around on the earth today. There are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And we would ask them, what did Jesus say he was going to do? When did he say it was going to happen? And I have to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, over and over and over and over, we had people read it, look up at us with a shocked and stunned look on their face, look back, read it again, look back up, look back down, read it again, and say to us, I had no idea that was in the Bible. When we would share Matthew 10:23, when Jesus predicted the preaching of the gospel and the persecution that would ensue from that, he said, you will not have fled through the cities of Israel until the Son of Man has come. And we point out he's talking to the apostles, sending them out. Once again, I didn't know that was in there. And so it's stunning to me how many people are not aware of the challenge of Christ. Just last week on YouTube, when I made mention, when one of my YouTube videos on the challenge of Christ was viewed by one particular individual, he said, well, you're right, Don. The challenge of Christ is for us to go out and seek to save the lost like Jesus did. It's to love people like Jesus did. Well, all of that's true. But Jesus was talking about his prophetic utterances. Don't believe me for my words, believe me for my works. Now, do we want to widen the focus and say, well, you know what? Jesus did love the poor, the sick, and he healed them. And yes, we are supposed to care for the poor and the sick. But those aren't prophecies. So when I responded to this individual and I said, well, obviously we are supposed to try to be like Christ in every facet of our life that we are capable of doing. No question. But that's not what Jesus was talking about specifically. And so as I continue to share with you how important it is that the church be able to meet the challenge of Christ. Oh, by the way, I've got to share with you, in one social media exchange, someone had posted in response to the challenge of Christ, and this individual posted back. Evidently, they had not watched any of my videos. All they saw was the challenge of Christ. And they posted to me and they said, what in the world are you talking about when you talk about the challenge of Christ? When I responded I just simply gave them John 10:37 and 38. And they posted back and they said to me, I don't understand what the challenge is. When I then posted Matthew 16:27 and 28, they literally disappeared. This is what I mean, ladies and gentlemen. When I say that the church today, the modern church in the broadest definition of that term, is simply not prepared to meet and to answer the challenge of Christ. Just this last week, a book was reviewed on a YouTube page. The book written by an atheist, The Lies of Christ. Guess what he focused on? Christ's prediction to come in the first century, and he said Jesus didn't do it. Jesus is therefore a liar. Folks, I have to tell you, we've got to be able to meet the challenge of Christ. We're losing young people by the hundreds and by the thousands because they go to college. They're confronted by agnostic, atheist, skeptical, Christ-hating, Bible-hating professors. And they do not know how to answer the challenge of Christ. We must be equipping our young people better, or we're going to lose them. Okay. Not only did Christ promise that he was going to come back in judgment in the first century, but for the last several videos, I've been sharing with you that Isaiah chapter 42 is not about his second coming. It's not about his coming in judgment of Matthew 16, 27 and 28. It refers to his first coming. And that promise and prophecy of his first coming was, guess what he was going to do? Establish justice and judgment in the earth. He was going to establish the kingdom. And yet, as I've been sharing with you over the last few videos, our dispensational friends say, well, yes, he came to do that, but due to Jewish unbelief, he couldn't do that. Therefore, God withdrew the offer until the time of the rapture, when he will remove the church, which he established as an interim measure because of the Jewish unbelief. So sometime very, very soon, we're told, and over we are told it's very, very soon, only for those predictions to fail. And so the Lord will rapture the church off of the earth, begin dealing with Israel once again, and this time around, guess what? They're going to believe. And so God will establish the kingdom, an earthly, nationalistic, militaristic theocracy on the earth. And so I shared with you over the last two videos that listen to me very, very carefully, because this is so incredibly powerful. The Jews did not reject Jesus' offer of the kingdom until Jesus first rejected their offer of the kingdom. And you know, time after time after time in my ministry, in sharing this with dispensationalists, I have had my dispensational friends go, whoa, wait, what? I've never heard that before in my life. Well, I can well imagine that they have never heard that before in their life. Just this last week, when I shared that on YouTube, one individual, a dispensationalist, although he's a skeptical, somewhat dispensationalist, because he said, you know, God's promises failed due to the Jewish unbelief. Folks, I've been saying all along, I know that most dispensationalists do not like to say that Jesus failed. Here's an individual that just openly says God's promises to Israel failed because of their unbelief. So who's in charge? Is it the omnipotent, omniscient God, or is it man in his weakness and in his sinfulness? Who's in charge here? We got to make up our mind. I had a formal public debate with Thomas Ice and Mark Hitchcock in 2003 in Florida. By the way, that debate is available in DVD form. And Mark Hitchcock had written an article sometime before, and he said, one of the reasons that I absolutely love to study prophecy is because it is history written beforehand. Well, I wrote an article in response to that. It's on my website, donkpreston.com. And I pointed out, now wait a minute. Here is Mark Hitchcock, who said, prophecy is history written before it takes place. But Mark Hitchcock, being a dispensationalist, says, well, we have all of these predictions in the Old Testament, all of these prophecies, history written beforehand, of the establishment of the kingdom in the first century, but due to Jewish unbelief, that history written beforehand never took place, which means the prophecies failed. So back to the statement, Jesus did not reject, The Jews did not reject the kingdom offer from Jesus until Jesus had first rejected the Jewish offer of the kingdom. Now, if you haven't watched the previous program or two, please go back and watch them. I mean, again, I've had people just go, whoa, I've just never heard that. You got to explain that. Well, the answer is in John chapter 6, verse 15. Jesus has just fed the multitude. And then it says, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and make him king, he withdrew himself. Folks, here's the offer of the kingdom to Jesus by the Jews. Here is Jesus rejecting the offer of the kingdom from the Jews. Now on YouTube, last week, when I went across that, this one individual that I've already mentioned said, "You're just silly. The kingdom has to be established in righteousness, and the Jews were unrighteous. They could not offer the kingdom of righteousness." Well, I responded and I said, "You are completely missing the point. The Jews had been part of, and the Old Covenant kingdom had always been a nationalistic, geopolitical, militaristic theocracy. That's what they wanted from Jesus." Listen, we know from rabbinic literature, we know that's what they wanted. We could even go to the book, for instance, of the book of Jubilee, a highly, highly popular book in the first century. They expected the Messiah to come and to whip the Romans and reestablish the militaristic theocracy. That was the Jewish expectation of the first century. So when Jesus fed the multitude, 5,000 men, not counting women and children, they believed that Messiah had come. The time was right for Messiah to whip the Romans. And again, that's what the Pharisees wanted. That's what the Essenes wanted. That's what the Zealots wanted. How disappointed was even Peter when he took out a sword and cut off the ear of Malchus when the Romans and the Jewish forces came to take Jesus to crucify him. And Jesus said, "Put up your sword, Peter." Those who live by the sword shall die by the sword. Listen, we have to ask ourselves the question, and this is really, 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 really an important question. Did the Jews want a kingdom? Well, that's obvious from John 6:15. Did they want a king? It's obvious from John 6:15. That's what they were offering Jesus. Did Jesus come to be king? That's what he told Pilate, John 18. Did he come to establish the kingdom? Well, that's what Isaiah 42 said he would come for. So if and since the Jews wanted a king, they wanted a kingdom, and if Jesus came to be king and he came to establish the kingdom, then why did he reject them, and then why did they reject him? Last week, I pointed out that we can go to Judges, chapter 8, for the beginning of the answer. Now, we could go all the way back to Deuteronomy 12 and 22 and other passages. Deuteronomy chapters 28 and following, in which the Lord knew and foretold that the time would come that Israel would desire a king, and that would not be a good thing. He's going to tax you. He's going to take your horses. He's going to take your children. He's going to take your daughters. And you're not going to like what he has to do. But we come forward to the period of the Judges. We come forward to the period of time under Gideon. Now the Midianites had invaded Israel. Israel was oppressed. And we are told what a horrific time it was. So the people cried out to Yahweh, and Yahweh raised up Gideon. And Gideon defeated the Midianites. The marvelous story, Judges chapter 6 and following. What a thrilling story of victory and a story of trusting in God. The story of Gideon truly is. Well, a couple of the kings of the Midianites managed to escape by the name of Zebah and Zalmunna. They were going to continue to constitute a threat to Israel. So Gideon pursued them. And he came to, as he went, he came to a couple of cities, one of them the city of Sukkot, and he said, I am in pursuit of Zebah and Zalmunna, but my men are hungry. We need water. We need food. And the men of Sukkoth, turned him down, and they say, well, have you captured those guys yet? And he says, well, not yet, but I'm going to. And the men of that city knew what the Midianites would do to them if Zebah and Zalmunna defeated Gideon and came back. So they said, well, I tell you what, no, we can't help you. Just, go on your way. And so he came to another city. Gideon did. Same thing happened. I've got to hurry here. The long story, or the short story of it is, Gideon destroyed Zebah and Zalmunna. He came back and really did some dirt to the two cities that had refused him. But all Israel saw the tremendous victory by Gideon. And so, verse 22 of Judges chapter 8. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, both you and your son and your grandsons also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian. What do they want? They want a king. What kind of king did they want? Well, they wanted a militaristic deliverer, right? I mean, after all, that's what Gideon had just done. So they want Gideon to be a king over them, to be their military protector, he, his son, and his grandsons. Be our king. But Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor my son, nor my grandsons. Watch this. The Lord shall rule over you. Now, from the departure from Egypt until the time of Judges, guess what? Israel had no king, right? They trusted in the Lord. If times were difficult, what did they do? They cried to the Lord, and the Lord would raise up a judge who would act for them temporarily. They would appear on the scene, they would bring deliverance, they'd go back home and go about their business. That's what the period of the kings was all about. It was not one permanent ruler / king on a throne ruling over Israel. Now, again, you have to catch the power of what happens here. And you have to catch the nature of what's going on. Israel wanted a militaristic, nationalistic, earthly, physical king to be their military ruler and leader and deliverer. Gideon refused. Do you catch that? Well, let's jump forward to the time of 1 Samuel. I suspect you may be familiar with this, but maybe you have never seen it in quite the light that I want to share with you. Samuel, one of the judges, but he wasn't a great military leader. He was a prophet of God. And he was nearing the end of his life. His sons were evil, wicked, and corrupt. And so the men of Israel came to Samuel and said, listen, you're about to pass away. You're an old man. So here's what we want you to do. 1 Samuel chapter 8. I'm going to take the time to read verses 1 and following. It came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his son judges over Israel. The name of the firstborn was Joel. The name of the second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba, but his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain. They took bribes. They perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, look, you're old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us, watch this, like all the nations. Do you hear the echoes of Judges chapter 8? You see, Zebah and Zalmunna were kings over the other nations. That's what Israel wanted, a physical, earthly, military kingdom. Here is precisely at the time of Samuel, that is precisely what the children and the men of Israel are asking for. Now watch this. Verse 6. The thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to the Lord. Oh, I got to hurry. The Lord said to Samuel, heed the voice of the people in all that they say and do, for they have not rejected you, they have rejected me. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to me very carefully. Lead into next week. The reason Jesus rejected Israel's offer of the kingdom was because Jesus knew that an earthly kingdom was never God's plan. We'll show you more next week.